Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to DappChat. In fact, if this is your first DappChat, welcome for the first time. Today we have a really interesting conversation that we're calling the R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic, and how those apply to the digital world. No, actually, that's not true. We're doing, we're going to talk about some terms that in our industry that get thrown around quite often: AR, VR, XR, MR. We're going to try to unpack them and um, share with you how we talk about them in the industry. And I can tell you, there's a lot of different opinions by a lot of partners, clients, even the three or four people who are on this DappChat. There's probably different opinions about what the definition of these things is. But just to set a bit of an expectation, I know when we started building out these types of experiences a couple of years ago, we did have a client, and I think Corey had asked them, what exactly is your definition of, for example, XR? And they said, well, actually anything that happens on a computer. So that's probably one of the broadest definitions. Oh, sorry. With that, there's a few gentlemen that have joined this DappChat. They are my learned colleagues. On my screen, anyways, at the bottom of the screen is our VP of Web3 and Industry 4. And in another episode of DappChat, we'll describe what Web3 and Industry 4 actually mean. But he is our VP of that. And above is our Gavin Poole. He's our Director of Learning Experience. And he is a gentleman who parses out the content of the world and actually turns it into AR, VR, XR, MR, some type of R experiences. R-rated is what we say in the industry. No, we don't.
Occasionally
So,
R-rated experience.
yeah. So, yeah, and you think it's these terms have been around for a while, so you think, oh wow, well, why would we be talking about this? And the reason is as I said at the beginning, level setting, just to make sure that when we talk about it, and hopefully we can influence how the industry speaks about it, that we're all talking apples and oranges when we're talking about different types of experiences. So I am going to throw out a very general and sort of vague question. But first of all, what are AR, VR, MR, XR? There's a bunch of other R's there too. There's actually NR, which means no R. That I just came up with about 5 minutes ago. But what we're going to do is we're going to talk a bit about the definitions of these things and how people, maybe have used the definitions in the past, how they've kind of evolved today, and we're going to talk about how they're actually used in industry, and some examples of. We're just going to talk through some examples of how AR and VR are actually used for. I'm sure people are maybe familiar with the more dramatic use cases, but actually very subtly how they're used, almost on a daily basis. So with that, I'm going to open the floor. And I'll start with Gavin, who's at the top of my screen. So Gavin, do you have a single definition for AR, VR, XR, MR? What in fact does R mean?
Well, the R is for reality, and these are all different versions of creating a reality for someone. I'll talk about maybe AR and VR, and then I'm going to throw it over to Corey, who can really put a bow on it by talking about how they all sort of interact with each other. But AR stands for augmented reality. It's really using the actual real world as the backdrop, if you will, for whatever the content you're developing. And VR would be a virtual reality. So that backdrop itself is going to be created. So everything in that environment that you're using is a virtual environment. Having said that, people often think about VR as being requiring goggles. Not necessarily. A VR experience could be had through your computer or through your phone. If the items in that world itself are what you're interacting with, then you are virtually in that world and you are having a VR experience. But certainly there are goggles, all kinds of different equipment that you can use, hands, feet, a whole suit that can make you experience a virtual experience and really live in that virtual world for a few moments. Corey, how about tell us a little bit more about MR or XR?
Oh, actually, sorry, before you move on there, Gavin, I did want to ask you a question because you jumped in and started talking about the realities, but basically, I think I just want to set the table first. Basically, what we're talking about is some sort of experience that's developed for some intention or some purpose, be it be it training, be it learning, be it art, be it entertainment or something. But we are talking about an experience that's you know I don't know. Again, it gets difficult to talk about, but not real. When I say not real, it
What is
sort of
real?
is in the modern. It is in the world, but it just happens to be a digital manifestation, if that will. But just read, just to set the table, we are talking about something, an experience that gets developed by someone, for example.
Yes, yeah, I
Okay,
think that's
great.
that's a good that's a very broad definition for
Yeah.
the realities that we're talking about. Yeah, and those realities can be, manufactured in a variety of ways, generally with computers, and that's the world that we're working in. But when we talk about how they're presented, there's a variety of ways to do that can still fit under these definitions. Can you tell us a little bit about mixed reality and how that works, how that fits in, Corey?
Yeah, so I like to think of, I guess, I mean, if we define XR, firstly, as the big umbrella that encompasses the other arcs. So extended reality is anything beyond base reality that you're extending, right? And we have augmented reality, which is the digital layer on top of the physical world. And mixed reality is digital elements that can interact with physical elements. VR kind of being more that fully immersive digital environment. So XR being the umbrella that encompasses those other three. So mixed reality, MR, where you can interact with physical elements. Like a good example would even be, I don't know if Teams has this functionality, but if you put your thumb up in some of the other, I don't think it works on this one, does it? No,
Not today.
This is NR, no reality.
Because Zoom does it too. If you put your thumb up, the bubble comes up. But anyway, that would be one example. Like AR and VR is used everywhere, I think, like across many industries. I think most of the use cases, I think people are probably familiar with marketing use cases or maybe more of the events-based use cases. Like if you're at a sporting event and you hold your phone up and you see a digital thing appear in the environment that's not actually there, like a dragon. I can't remember which sports teams have done this already, but I think quite a few of them have.
Well, they've had whole broadcasts, right? There've been, Nickelodeon has a broadcast of the Super Bowl last year. They've had Marvel had a broadcast of an NBA game where there were superheroes sitting on the top of the backboard as the players were shooting. So, yeah, certainly everyone's kind of experiences this, and sort of the most exciting ones that we remember tend to be ones that are marketing experiences, because it's a great way to get a message across and sort of place your message into an environment that somebody's already comfortable with in that sort of mixed reality world.
Okay, thanks. So just to set the table, and again, the interesting thing about this conversation is that as interesting and perhaps confusing it might be for anybody who's watching this, actually, it's confusing almost on a daily basis when it's your business to deal with it. It's trying to explain to a partner, or explain to a potential customer what an AR experience is over a VR experience is. I think, and guys, chime in if you think this is a common experience when anybody puts something in front of an R. At least in my experience, people naturally assume some kind of headset or something like that.
Certainly.
And and there's two sort of reactions along that line. One is a very, oh my God, that's very esoteric. Esoteric meaning, expensive, or perhaps like, really out there. Or there's another reaction, which is, oh, wow, that's esoteric. We got to get there because we want to be sort of a market leader, or we want to be, avant-garde. We want to be ahead of the curve. And I think the gentleman on the screen will agree with me when when we say, at least for our purposes, I think of all the, the different R's that are out there, and I'm not sure which R I am talking about right now, but the ones that tend to match the sort of technology platform that are in market right now. So we find this a lot that people are dreaming all over the place about, maybe on the far end of AR and XR and VR, some on maybe not so far, but what we find is the best applications tend to be those that can be accessed by more people. And I will foreshadow another episode that's coming up, and we do have an episode coming up very soon about talking about Roblox and Fortnite as XR. I hope I'm using the right R. Some are setting for actual experiences, and it's nothing new. It's actually being used now. But I did want to keep I do want to keep the sponge wet so everybody comes back to our next one. So I'm already foreshadowing the next one. So and in that case, I will be much more naive about those particular environments. So guys, we do this day in and day out. We have experience day in, day out. We deal with all the confusion. We deal with thought leaders that are way ahead of the power curve. We deal with I was going to say perhaps financial people, but it doesn't necessarily have to be financial people who are will say, oh well, that's that these seem very costly or so on to put together some of these experiences. But just in your minds, what do you guys see in the marketplace right now in terms of like AR, VR, XR? Like where are they used? Where are they used effectively? Perhaps people in the audience might, they might have a use case that they're thinking of, that we might jingle their mind or something like that. But Gavin, go ahead. Where give me an idea, like where have these been used effectively? And by the way, I know we've all used them ourselves. We actually probably use them on a day-to-day basis without even knowing it. But above and beyond our own personal experiences with, like, for example, the Google Maps or the Apple Maps that have now AR VR capabilities built into it. Tell me what you're seeing in the marketplace.
Well, I was just going to say a really good example of not to cloud the conversation, but people will talk about how scary AI is and they never want to use it, but they're very happy to use Google. Well, Google isn't that great without any AI components to it. Similarly, we're all thinking about how weird and far away things like VR and XR our technology are, but when's the last time you held up your Google Maps to figure out which way you were going on the street? For me, that was probably yesterday. And you're very comfortable with that technology because you've used it and you trusted it. So when you were talking about the best use cases for technology being the ones that fit the need the most, yes. I would say one of the other big elements that we can consider is the ones that are the most dependable, the ones that have some of the best back-end work, the ones that, we're going to talk about the Fortnites and the Roblox in the world, and that's in a separate future episode. But one of the things that make them so effective is that when someone turns on the machine, they know that they're going to be on, they know that they're going to be up, and they're going to be working. So I think a lot of like any technology, a lot of the most successful cases are the ones that are designed best and that have been tested the most, and that are out there and very capable and reliable is really one of the other, like any kind of technology. But to throw out a couple other ones, Corey, how actually I'm sure you have a list in your mind of ways that we can go with this and really good examples of. Let's start with VR and AR, different examples there.
Yeah, VR may be the only one that is, I guess, based on current definition, kind of constrained to a piece of hardware, where you would think of kind of a headset when you think of VR. Some people, as Joey had alluded to, even define VR as an immersive space that you can use from your computer. But I think, as far as the industry is concerned, we're recognizing VR as a headset, right?
Yeah.
So things like the Meta Quest, which again gets confusing because some of these headsets and wearables actually do have are like mixed reality. Like, for instance, HoloLens, Microsoft HoloLens was a mixed reality headset where you would see an AR overlay, but you would see the real world, but you'd see an AR overlay through object recognition on real things in the real world, right? So things you could interact with, and the AR would recognize those physical objects in your space. VR headsets are becoming choose your immersion level almost, it seems, right? They are kind of starting to blend the AR and VR technologies together. But yeah, some of the things I can think of, wayfinding was great. We're talking about AR wayfinding, which is a great use case. One of the ones for VR I think about is medicine. In medicine, they use it to train doctors on medical procedures, for instance. You may have a new procedure that's coming out, and you don't have access to those tools or those environments that those are typically trained in. So you might use VR to spread that knowledge across the world real quickly. Like that's a good example. As far as what are some
There's been a lot of success in medical training. I was just going to say with both AR and VR. I've seen some really cool things for training on phlebotomy and doing injections with tracking veins on people's arms. And these things, unfortunately, a lot of the challenge with this hardware becomes that they have an expense attached to them. But a lot of studies around these things are proven to be really, really effective. And the only hurdle in expanding them really is some of the expense around it right now. But yeah, I'm sorry, continue.
No, I mean, that's a good point, but I think also like it's important to take into account like the expense. A lot of people move to this because at scale it actually becomes cheaper. It actually does tend to be a more cost-effective solution at scale for most of these things, right? Yeah, in a nutshell, if I'm training 3 doctors on a specific, and they're the only 3 doctors who are going to receive the training, that might be a very specific use case. But at scale, most of the time, these tools are way more cost effective.
A really good point. We've experienced that firsthand, right? We've had clients before where travel is a big part of their training budget, and once you can start putting something virtually out there that can be launched from anywhere in the world, the savings can be.
We're talking about wayfinding, which is interesting because wayfinding was something I'm going to say even 8 to 10 years ago was considered what do they call it? Power app, not a power app, but a almost like a unicorn app for VR. And I think we've seen the phone systems evolve over the year to include XR extensions and ability to host and to sort of visualize XR experiences. And so wayfinding was big. So for everybody to understand what wayfinding is, it's just you're inside a building and then you need to get to the Starbucks, but these buildings these days and malls are massive. You just yell into your phone, "Where is Starbucks?" and it sort of gives you a view, go this way, go that way, so on and so forth. So it's almost like internal Google Maps. In fact, Google Maps, when it first came out with tools to actually start wayfinding, like building wayfinding apps. I don't think it ever it never really took off, but I think the phone ecosystems now are doing a much better job. So allegedly, in most of the major airports in the world now, there are for Android and for iPhone apps, there are wayfinding. So you can be in an airport and where is D57, my hangar, where's my plane? So these features are now available. So it's funny, like 8 to 10 years later, there's they're just now gaining some traction. But what I wanted to talk about is this. I mean, I think we've talked a bit about sort of hard applications, meaning there's an A experience and there's a B result. But there's something I think we're seeing, and I hope you guys agree with me. I think if you don't agree with me, that'd be interesting. But I hope you agree with me. But what we've seen a lot in the past 6 months, maybe a year, is a lot of companies coming to us and say, "Hey, listen, we want to preserve our culture," or we had the pandemic. It was hard to keep our culture, across the planet. We're looking for interesting ways to sort of maintain culture. Show people what we're all about, shared values, and so on and so forth. So that's one thing. And another thing is it's part and parcel of that as well, is, how these organizations react to their partners and to their customers and so on. So I'm talking about sort of the soft skills. I don't know if there's a better word for that than soft skills, but I've seen a lot of movement in the past, as I said, 6 months, maybe to a year, where companies have come to us to say, help us preserve our culture. Like, how can we, train people how to interact with, people, for example, in retail and reality and retail shops and so on. So maybe you guys, I don't know, I've come across that. I don't know if you guys have come across that. I think actually in some of the courseware we're developing, we actually have simulations where everybody plays a certain role within a certain transaction. I'm thinking along the lines of HR type of HR types of interactions where in an HR front, how do you deal with, okay, I'm going overtime, or I have to take sick leave or something like that. And I've seen, and I know we've been approached to do sort of applications where somebody who is looking for time off, or maybe somebody who wants to learn the culture of the company they're working at, actually they get cast in the role of the HR person, and here's what I got to think about if X, Y, and Z happen, and vice versa. The HR person can feel can understand the perspective of whoever might be asking, and all of this is under the guise of an avatar, of a person where nobody really knows who you are, so you can act you can act and learn accordingly. But do you guys got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. And when you're looking for other words for soft skills, I've heard power skills being thrown around as a recent term.
Oh, that's good.
I think
that.
Power
skills. Well, it's
better
you
than
can,
soft skills. That needs a rebrand for sure.
Yeah,
is it power or
the people who have the quote unquote soft skills tend to end up with more power in organizations, I find. I think maybe that's how they end up with the ability to rebrand it that way. But yeah, I think essentially when we talk about training and we talk about using VR and AR for training, often it really shines when we're teaching processes. Whether that process is interacting with a machine, whether that process is interacting with a group of people, whether that process is interacting with administrative tasks. I think the ability to put that in people's hands so they can practice in the comfort of their own home, so they can still practice in an environment that may be dangerous or difficult to access. It's hard to argue against that form of training for that type of skill. Now, having said that, there's a lot of exciting things happening with training these various communication skills, either leveraging AI for it or using just the ability of the remote. So putting somebody through a process that they're going to be doing in their job with virtual clients, and then having somebody actually observe, because you can easily record the progress through the activity, and then you can have somebody observe that progress and then be able to measure that. And when you're talking before about economy of scale, you think about how I could have one personnel manager watching my 12 sales floor people go through the same process, and that would take up the better part of one day. I could also have 144 of those people going through that process and actually be able to be able to measure, unless they've completed the event to the standard that your company has, that I'm not even going to bother viewing it. You could use it as a training tool, but also a hiring tool, really. So there's some really exciting ways that you can kind of leverage that technology. Corey, what are your thoughts on training on these kinds of skills?
Yeah, like I said, I think it's the right hardware or right tech stack for the right use case. I think is definitely something we highlighted in the past, but I think it's tremendously valuable based on what that use case may be. Like we said, we've seen some VR stuff in medicine. We've seen some mixed reality stuff, kind of more in the industrial space for walking people through procedures on machines, and we've seen AR for job aids and quick reference material on site. So I think it's tremendously valuable. Yeah, and I think we're only going to see more of it. I don't think it's for the consumer or somebody looking to adopt the technology, they shouldn't be so worried about which R they're in. You know, the technology provider and you know, development studio you'd be working with can help you identify what's the right technology for your specific use case. So I wouldn't get so caught up in, you know, is it augmented? Is it virtual? Is it mixed? Is it, you know, it's best to just work with a solutions provider who can give you kind of the insights into what's the best technology for this particular use case.
So how does this, again, sort of a twist question, how does AR, VR support or, you know, vis-a-vis traditional methods of communication, how do they compare? And before we get into that, again, as I said, I think I had a yes, I do. So from the Merriam-Webster dictionary, the definition of communication, A1A is the very first one. There's a pretty broad definition, or pretty long definition, but I think 1A is the best. A process by which information is exchanged between individuals through a common system of symbols, signs, and behaviors. So on that note, I'll open it to the, actually, before I open it to the floor, I'll just throw my 2 cents regarding communication. I think in a lot of the experience we've worked on and a lot of experiences that we've actually built, there generally is an ask with the experiences, and the ask, if it sort of fits properly, as well, can we get, you know, like-minded people, or, you know, people of certain groups to communicate with each other through these things. So our last DappChat was about metaverses. We build industrial metaverses, and, you know, one of the asks is, well, can, you know, people within this environment, within our community, can they interact with each other? And the answer is yes. I mean, we're all familiar with these tools. We probably use them all every single day, including this tool we're using right now, Teams. But I think what this is just my opinion, but I think these environments give someone, you know, when you're entering into a place with your avatar, for example, you tend to be more open and more fearless. That's just my opinion, because it's not, you know, in front of these two guys in front of me right now, I actually got to look like I'm kind of smart. But if it's just my avatar or somebody else's avatar, you know, you don't. There's sort of a interesting that you can almost be more of yourself. You can, you know, you can open yourself up a bit more, because nobody is really seeing more or less the real you. But you might be communicating the real you. So just in terms of, you know, very broad statement, in terms of these tools, I think do allow people to be a bit more, you know, expressive. And by the way, I'm not talking about throwing up emojis and, you know, exploding hearts and things like that. Just mean in terms of, you know, your opinions and so on are more respected. That's just my humble opinion. Guys, you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, to your point. Well, yeah, to your point, there's been studies done about, you know, emotional safety during training. You know, it's well accepted thought that if you feel safe, you are in a better space to learn, and so your learning results are always going to be better when you're not feeling threatened and you're feeling more comfortable. And that people who participate in virtual environments, often represented by an avatar, or just in some ways, we're all doing it right now. Like you mentioned on Teams, we're in a virtual environment. I can see you, but I'm not in the same room as you. I feel comfortable because I'm in this space, but I also feel like I'm being seen because and I think, while there's two different examples, one that I feel empowered by being hidden and not being seen, and another where I feel like I am being seen, but I'm in my own home. I think what they both speak to really is an enhanced experience in communication. Why did Teams take off during the pandemic? Because people were working from home, and because it was something that was considered a step beyond telephones. If I'm going to be talking to somebody, particularly a client or a colleague, I want to feel like I can best express myself. And that means that sometimes I'm going to use my hands. Sometimes I would like to see the person talking to me and what the expression is on their face, if at all possible. Exactly. Sometimes those things happen just off camera, and that's very intentional as well. But I think when we talk about how does AR and VR improve communication over traditional methods, I think because it gives you an enhanced experience. And depending on which way you're, what types of tools that you're leveraging, it's really giving you more senses to rely on in communicating. And communicating is really exactly what you said. It's gaining ideas, projecting ideas from one person to another, and that's learning, that's selling. That's a lot of part of business is really communication.
I don't know. I mean, the way I think XR technology allows us to also communicate concepts and things that we otherwise couldn't, or would be very costly, or like going to space. You can't practically do that. So VR has the ability to take you to places and convey concepts and to participate in activities even that you otherwise may not even be able to, right? You might be constrained in the physical world to do. So I think that's another way to take communication. Another thinking is that sometimes we use these tools for like expressing some of the more intangible brand values of a company, right, through employee onboarding or new hire training, right? How do we communicate to somebody effectively that trust is the big value in the world? This is a nebulous, esoteric concept that might take some creativity to kind of reproduce. So I think digital environments are a great tool for some of that as well too. Things that you might not be able to express, esoteric concepts that are hard to express in reality. So, and another great thing in terms of communication, I think a lot of what we see is people looking for how do we convey things remotely, and like you were alluding to, Gavin, I think that's one of the biggest strengths of this technology is that we do think in person is fantastic, but that's oftentimes just not possible, right? So for a whole range of reasons, either you're in a remote location or your team's dispersed across many countries or just dispersed across many states in a country. And it's costly to shut down machinery and to get fly everybody out and to have the travel and expense of that. So, we like to say it's the next best thing, right? When you can't be there in person, this is usually the next best thing, right? You can convey concepts very, very clearly and even teach practical skills in front of multi-million-dollar digital twins, like multi-million-dollar equipment that isn't actually there, so that's I don't think that was previously even possible, right? Like we're doing things that you could teach maybe theoretical skills, or traditional e-learning kind of addresses that quite nicely, but how do you teach practical skills? And I think this technology has that ability to communicate that language as well. So
And I was just thinking when you were talking about about the exploded viewer and this concept of you can actually get into conversations about things that are not practically possible in reality. That idea of taking a machine, having it completely separated apart into various pieces, and be able to, in a virtual environment with other people in virtual environments, take piece by piece and examine it and talk about it. Again, that practically is not possible to do in real life. So while we can sometimes say it's the next best thing, in some cases, you can say it's better than the real thing.
I'm thinking about like a car dealership. Like you can't go in and tell them to take the engine apart so you can see every component, but you might want that level of insight into what's under the hood. You might say, all right, explain, okay, cool. In augmented reality or virtual reality, any of the R's, you can expand this for me and show me how it's made, how it works.
Well, Corey, you brought up, I think one fabulous point, and I'm pretty sure we all agree with this because basically our livelihoods are built on it, is the fact that our customers, our partners, a few of our developers and so on are actually everywhere on the planet. And I know, and this is my personal experience, maybe 10 to 15 years ago, it started getting easier, like 2 to 3 years ago with through the pandemic and all, it actually became, when we were talking about communication, perhaps even a better way to do it than traditional methods. In fact, it's almost impossible not to do it. And my final trump card that I'll throw on this is there's one thing that we have not talked about, but I will talk about it, and that's the fact that we can record everything. So this, as we are right now. So, so you can go back, revisit. I know we've had customers come to us and say, listen, we put people through these, perhaps training simulations, and I've never had a better view of what they're doing, or how much they practice, or where they go and where they may go right, or maybe where they may go wrong. They've never had that level of detail. So, I think in certain circumstances, can the communication be overwhelming? Yes, but I think if you're, smart and judicious about, how you parse your data and what you pay attention to, which does take time, that you get a net better result. And I think that's it. So that's the thanks for that feedback, guys. I do want to move into a DappHouse classic, which is our word or phrases of the day. And it is strongly related to AR, VR, XR, and it is called spatial computing. Corey, I think this has you earmarked to start the conversation, but have at it.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, spatial computing. So this is a word we've seen really associated with the Apple ecosystem. I guess this is something that Apple threw out with kind of their AVP, the Apple Vision Pro headset. And yeah, spatial web or spatial computing, this is like, we've heard some of these terms before. Spatial computing, I think, really kind of refers to more of the plumbing, like the infrastructure that supports all of this 3D immersive technology, all of the R's, right? It's what sits underneath that. I think of languages like object-based programming languages and things like that, things that are defined in 3D spaces. So, yeah.
So it's not just Minority Report. It's not just taking out because I'm hoping DappHouse gets me that computer one day, so I can just type in the air and move things around, stretch out my screen. But I know that spatial computing is a lot more than that, and it's not quite so future based. It's something that's here right now, right? Like we do have absolutely examples with the new Apple glasses that are out. There's some really cool stuff that you see in their literature, but there's things that are being done, every day on machine shop floors that are using spatial computing right now.
That's true.
Yeah, I think this is really synonymous with kind of like Web3, the next evolution of the internet. Like we talk about this a lot, the move from websites to web spaces. So 3D kind of becoming the go-to medium that we're going to start to interact with on whatever piece of hardware we kind of get our hands on. 3D is becoming more ubiquitous, and I think that's kind of the important part.
Sometimes I get the feeling that spatial computing actually sounds like something in outer space, but sometimes I think they associated the term with a new product just to get away from using terms that describe the industry as it is. So a new term to describe the industry. So spatial computing, is it related to AR, VR, XR? Yes. Is it catch-all?
Those are examples of spatial computing.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Will the world refer to this as, there's so many terms out there. I think one of our take-home messages, we just want you to know that other than XR, which I'll come back to, some of these terms can be used interchangeably, and if you're not using that correctly, that's okay, because somebody in the industry will probably quickly correct you or correct an understanding. But I did pick up on one point, just sort of close things out. What Corey said earlier on, he said something about VR now is, I think, the one term now that is associated with a headset. Like, I think that's pretty much part and parcel now. And I think at least that one term now, somebody says VR, they're generally talking about a headset. And if there's not, you might say, well, you're probably talking more about AR or XR or MR. Refresh my memory again. What is MR?
The blend of the physical and digital worlds, where physical and digital elements can interact. If there's none of that interaction, it's kind of typically referred to as AR, right? Okay. That's the differentiator between AR and MR, and I think those are the ones that are often confused.
Fair enough. And sorry, Gavin, go ahead.
If I take something from the real world, digitize it and put it into a virtual environment, and you are on it, whether through browser, through download. Is that not a virtual reality experience if you are in a 3D realistic world, but on a 2D screen? Would that not still be considered VR?
No, probably extended reality. Like any screen you're interacting with that's got a digital environment in it, I would probably classify as XR, the broad term. I think
Okay.
is probably the easiest way to look at it. But virtual reality pretty much is synonymous with a fully immersive headset digital environment strapped to your face. The Apple Vision Pro actually has pass through and other stuff. So, HoloLens had AR. So like an MR, HoloLens is the best example, right? So if I have a lever and I see an augmented overlay on that lever, like pull lever this way to operate, right? And I pull it, it's going to recognize that I did that in the physical environment. And now the overlay is going to be this way. Say you've closed it, right? So I've interacted with the physical environment that's altered the digital space, if that makes any sense.
One thing just to close, I would say, I'm going to say this, and I'm hoping my colleagues agree with me, is that we have all these things, AR, VR, XR, and spatial computing, and so on and so forth. But what I would say, regardless of the experience, be it art, be it entertainment, be it work related, and so on, if you notice that it improves your standard of living in your real life, then it's a good thing. I'm taking everybody the outro. Does everybody gonna sing it? DappChat. We're looking forward to our DappChat number 3. This is number 2, DappChat number 3, which is around Roblox and Fortnite. I'm interested to find out myself. And above and beyond that, I know we've talked about a lot of examples in this DappChat about training and so on, but you will see Gavin, our Director of Learning Experience, taking us through some industrial and manufacturing implementations of AR, VR, XR, MR, QR, spatial computing, the whole 10 yards.